When I was 19, I participated in a singing show in Croatia because I'm Croatian. My parents are Croatian. So I went to the audition and I got in. And so I participated in the show, and it was a great experience, a very intense experience, but I was not necessarily prepared physically for what the show asked of me. The days were really long. We had to get up at 7 a.m. and be in the studio. The studio was freezing cold, and we didn't leave until 10 p.m. at night, especially when we had rehearsals. So it was really, really long days, and that was all good and fine. But the problem was that I was struggling to eat even before I got on the show. I was struggling to have a healthy relationship with food because for some reason, I listened to someone that I shouldn't have been listening to. They tried to help me with something else that I was going through related to being very ill. And they tried to help me, and in trying to help me, because you need to understand that when I got sick when I was quite young. And since then, I have done absolutely everything you could ever imagine to cure myself, because I immediately, when I was diagnosed, realized that the only person who could ever help me would be me. So I did everything that I could, like things that seem impossible to other people. But I did that because I was never the person to just accept a situation for what it is. And I would have never accepted just being the sick girl or just quitting. So I did a lot of things. And one of those things that backfired unintentionally, I don't blame the person necessarily, but it was quite the dangerous thing to do because I was underage at the time, and I wasn't really aware of the whole context of what was happening. The person heard of a certain kind of liquid that was supposed to, I don't even remember what it was supposed to do, but basically regenerate your cells. Let's just say it was supposed to regenerate your cells to make it a little bit more of a simple concept. And so they essentially fed me poison. It started with taking like 1 or 2 drops per day. And saying this out loud now and looking back on it now, it's insane. But I'm going to tell you something about when you're in a situation where you think that there is no hope and where you think there is no way out, you will do absolutely anything in the world simply to feel better. For the first month or so, it was fine. I started noticing some nausea, especially, after eating or sometimes even before. And so I would try to avoid to eat as much as I possibly could because I was fearing that feeling of, it wasn't just nausea, it was also my heart racing really fast, my hands sweating, my hands shaking. Like, it would have a lot of side effects, but I believed, that it could help me. And so I was never a quitter. So if a person that I trust, and I trusted this person at the time because I don't know, I just helped build up this level of trust. Because, like I told you, I was really freaking young. And when somebody says that they can help you, you want to believe them, is what it is. Is what it comes down to. And I'm sure they had good intentions. But essentially what it comes down to is that I was taking poison. It was a poisonous liquid. But, it was like rumored to have these great effects. And because of that, I slowly started destroying my relationship to food and to eating, because essentially, like I told you, I would stop eating. Like, I would try to avoid it, and I would know that whenever I would eat, it would be horrible. Like, I either couldn't keep the food down, or I just would feel very bad afterwards. And all of that was happening shortly before I went on that show. So at some point, I stopped taking the poison because I thought to myself, this is insane. Like, you cannot sustain this. This is not healthy. And I stopped taking it. And the person was actually quite disappointed. They gave me the feeling of, you're quitting, you need to keep this going, this is good for you, you will feel so much better. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna pause on that, and I'm going to focus on other things. But thank you though. And later on, like years later, I realized that was actually insane. That was actually insane. Like, it could have been way worse. And thankfully, I had the brain capacity at the time to say, you know what, I'm gonna chill on the poison for now. And I mean, they never called it poison. They never said it was poison. But after the research I did, when I was reflecting on it some more, like, at a later date, is when I realized, wow, that was actually freaking dangerous, and it was literally poison. Like, there's no other way to describe it. Like, if you would take more than 2 drops a day, like if you would drink a little bit more, you would immediately RIP. But that's another thing. By the time I went on that show, I had essentially destroyed my relationship with food, and I had a very sensitive stomach, so I could only eat very specific things. On days where I knew I had to perform, I would try to avoid eating altogether because I was already nervous. Like, the situation was very anxiety inducing. So I thought to myself in my head, I was like, okay, I can only eat like bread, for example, or something that is very, very like the most neutral food that you can find, so that I don't have a reaction to it, and so that the nervousness and the anxiety doesn't make it worse. Because I thought, okay, if I'm extra anxious, then it's just going to be that much worse. On these long days where we worked or rehearsed from 7 till 10, I would not eat the whole day. And then after everything was done, after the day was done, I would eat. And it was usually like, it was not healthy. It was like way too much, because then I had starved myself the whole day and I was so incredibly hungry, and I would eat, but then, I would get nauseous, of course, or I would get nauseous the next day, because the anxiety started all over again, because then we had the live performance or the televised performance or whatever. And even the funny thing is, nobody noticed, like not a single person. I think my mom actually thought that it was weird, or my dad, like they thought it was strange how I would react, before performances. They would be like, this is very strange, because I never had this issue. I never had this problem, even with performing. Like, I would always be nervous, but I never had this problem of having to lock myself in the bathroom for hours. And actually, one time during a live performance, I was like, we were supposed to be there at 7 a.m. and I was there at 11 because I couldn't make it out of the bathroom. It was crazy. And TMI, but I want you to understand that oftentimes when somebody is going through something like that, then a lot of people don't notice. They don't notice until the situation reaches an extreme. While I was there, while I was on the show, people saw that I wasn't eating. And that is a funny thing to me, is how did nobody see it? How did nobody see that I didn't eat a single thing during lunchtime? Or I think they even had catering. I'm not sure, but I think they did. And I never would take a single thing. Like, everybody was eating together, all the cast and crew, and I was never eating a single thing. And even one time after a performance, I said on stage, like, they asked me, how do you feel, and I was like, oh yeah, I just spent the morning in the bathroom, like. And they were like, oh, but nobody said anything. They were like, oh, it's just nerves. But yeah, it wasn't nerves. It was something worse. Afterwards, after I wrapped the show, I started reevaluating and reflecting on the things that have actually happened, and started thinking about whether these things are normal. Because while it was happening, I kid you not, I thought that is just the way it's always going to be now, and that's normal. Like, it's normal to have nerves. Even I was just thinking, you know what, it's just the stress of, you know, the physical labor that goes into it, and it's just, you know, the stress and the nerves. But I never really had an issue with that. But I just thought that is normal. I thought that's just show business, you know, that's showbiz, that's how it needs to be. But then after we wrapped, I took some time to reflect on it, and then there came the worst moment of my life, which was an accident that occurred that really changed everything for me. But because of that accident I think is actually the reason why that issue went away, because I had no choice but to eat, and I put myself on a very strict diet in order to repair my body. Otherwise, I would have not survived that. Like, I would not be the same or look the same that I do now, because I would have not made it. So I put myself on a very protein rich and you know, just vegetables and greens and all that. I put myself on a very strict diet where my goal was to heal myself as soon as I possibly could. They were like, okay, it's going to take you X amount of time, and I was like, I want to cut that in half, because I'm going to eat, I'm going to train, I'm going to like be Iron Man basically. And that's essentially what I did, and that fixed my relationship with food. After that, it took a while, kind of, it went like a pendulum, like back and forth, but it took a while. But then basically there was a worse thing that happened that kind of fixed another thing, if that makes sense. What you should take away from that is not that something bad needs to happen to you or something worse needs to happen to you in order for you to have a healthy relationship with your nutrition or yourself again. No. But what you should take away from it is that it's definitely up to you, and you can work on that yourself. You don't necessarily need for somebody to come in and save you and help you. And, you know, they can be helpful if you have access to that. Then absolutely ask for help and, get the help that you need. But if you don't have access to it, and if you don't have these opportunities, then you can do that yourself. You can question these things. You can, first of all, question why you're doing it, what has caused it. I mean, for me, there was like a specific issue or a specific trigger, which was the poison. But that poison can stand for anything, it can stand for standards that, people have put upon you or that you have put upon yourself. It doesn't always need to be an outside factor. It can come within, anything can be the poison and the trigger that causes that to happen. But what it comes down to in the end is that it is up to you to have a healthy relationship with yourself and with your body, because it is the vessel that you need to go through this world. It is the first thing that people see when they see you, and of course your inside is more important. What's in here is more important, but the outside, that physical body, it carries you through life. So you owe it a great deal of gratitude for doing that, and so you should treat it accordingly, and you should supply it with the best fuel. I know it's cliche, and I know a lot of people say that, but I think you will simply feel better mentally as well when you respect yourself and respect your body as much as that is possible. It's a long journey, but I just wanted to share this story, and maybe it helps somebody. Like maybe some of you will see this and think, okay, this is now my sign to work on it and change it, because otherwise it just becomes so extreme that it can be very difficult to come back from that. And honestly, if I hadn't experienced that accident and that whole thing, that's the story for another time. But I don't know what would have happened, because I was not in a good place, and it just kind of knocked me right back into place.